Welcome to Magnify Your Message. Inspiration magnified.
But the hard part is you can't define their happiness. You only see it through your prism. And your prism is based on your experience, which is different than today's experience.
Welcome back to another episode of Magnify Your Message. I'm your host, Cheryl Hunter, and today we have a conversation that will move you, inspire you, and maybe even change the way that you look at mental health and parenting. My guest today is someone who took an unthinkable tragedy and turned it into a mission to save lives. Elliot Kallen is a powerhouse, a true leader with over 30 years' experience in financial advising. He's an entrepreneur, a keynote speaker, and a passionate advocate for philanthropy. But his most profound work comes from the heart. You see, in 2015, Elliot lost his precious son Jake to suicide. It was a moment that shattered his world, but in the midst of grief, Elliot made a decision. No parent, no family should ever have to endure this pain alone. Today, Elliot is here to share his journey, and he shares practical tools, real, tangible resources that are making a difference in the fight against teen suicide. This is a conversation today that can quite literally save a life. So, grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join me as I welcome Elliot Kallen. Today's story is both heartbreaking and heartwarming. Please listen in on today's episode with Elliot Kallen. Elliot, thank you for being here and thank you for the difference that you make in this world.
Cheryl, thank you so much for having me on.
It is an honor. What is it that you provide for people?
Cheryl, we've created a 501c3 charity program called A Brighter Day. And what we do is we create resources on stress and depression for teens and their families with the goal of stopping teen suicide. And we are touching now, 8 years into this, between 4,000 and 8,000 families every single month of the year in 4 different countries.
That is absolutely extraordinary. And I want to get into later on how you're touching these families and how we can get involved. But first, would you share with us how this came to be? Why A Brighter Day?
Well, it's a great question, and I have to tell you, warn your listeners, it begins with a sad story, as so many charities begin when there's a need to be filled. And that is 9 years ago, my sophomore at the University of Montana son walked up to the highway, no drugs, no alcohol, and he jumped in front of an oncoming truck, took his life. And we were frantically looking for him on a Friday because his phone was turned off, and anybody that knows teenagers knows they never turn off their phone, ever. And his was off. We left messages, call. And at 6:30 at night, Federal Express showed up with a 6-page suicide note. He had been dead since about 1 o'clock in the morning. And in that note, much of it was rambling, but there was one major paragraph in the beginning of it that said, "Mom and Dad, I've been thinking about this for a really long time. I never would have told you how I felt. I never would have asked for your help, and I never would have taken your help." And on the way home from Montana with his body under the plane, I read that paragraph over and over and over. And I turned to his mom and I said, we have to do something to stop this devastation and destruction that we're about to go through from happening to other families. And we're going to do it in the form of a nonprofit because I can't take any money for it. That's blood money. We have to be able to help families out. And we started by doing musically based charitable events with resources that we put together. COVID hit, we evolved, and now we've got multiple ways of touching families. And we've been doing that. I know we're going to talk about that, but multiple ways of touching families. Again, every day of the week, literally my phone rings at least once a week. Can you help my child? I don't know what to do. This morning, I had a 91-year-old mother call me to say my 60-year-old son is suicidal and I don't know what to do. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I can help you at all. She was in San Diego. And I said, but let's get your 61-year-old son on the phone and let's get him to some type of local counseling. And she said, you could do that. I said, we'll not only get him into local counseling, we'll pick up the next 3 months of it for him. That's what we can do.
Wow. There's so much in what you've said. I'm sorry that you've experienced this is so insufficient. Thank you for being willing to share with us what happened to Jake and how you've turned it into a way to contribute to other families. How did you know where to start?
Well, when we came home, I came home. If you're a parent listening to this, you're not in mourning when your son dies or child dies, doesn't matter, boy or girl. You're in shock. So that's where this all begins. And as I began to go through shock and towards the mourning phase, I've been a business owner and an entrepreneur my entire life, and I've been charitably inclined my entire life, both in words, in action, or in words, action, and money, all of it. We were raised to give back, and I'm the president of Boys and Girls Club and other organizations. And I knew I wanted to create a charity. And I thought, what's the best way to reach teens? There are enough adult charities out there. They don't need me. I want to reach teens. And I thought music. Originally, I thought sports because I'm a little bit of a jock, a little bit. I don't want to give myself too much credit here. And I thought it would be sports, but turns out today, most kids aren't playing sports anymore in high school. It's a very small percentage up there. So I thought music. So I thought, okay, I've got to figure out how to get kids in music. And so I met with a few bands that I knew out here that were my type of bands. Beatles cover bands, Neil Diamond cover bands, those kind of bands, Rolling Stone cover bands, Beach Boys cover bands. And I got them all in one room and I said, I want to do this, have these concerts around the Bay Area, invite teens, put out resource tables of all the companies that create resource for teens and have them go up and get help. And we'll raise money for the bands separately for the concerts. And it was those groups collectively, this little brain trust that got together and said, Elliot, that's not the way to do this. The way to do this is create resources and let teen bands play for teens, give them something to take home like a backpack that has resources. And by resources, I don't mean like a stress ball. I mean legitimate, useful things that they can use tonight. And that's how we started. We started with Battle of the Bands. You can't use the word battle because it creates stress. So it became Teen Band Showcase. And we started to do this. And the one thing I noticed right away, some parents showed up, mostly it was teens. We weren't finding the backpacks on the ground after the concert. That's how we knew it was going to work out.
Right. So they were actually taking them.
Yeah, I can't say they were reading it, but they were taking it home. The other thing, Cheryl, is I convinced, or maybe I helped to convince, I live in it's not super affluent. It's an affluent upscale community of Lafayette, California. And it's 3 communities, now 3.5 communities in there that are part of the high school district. And I convinced them to do a survey of high schoolers on depression and suicide. And you know, high schools today around the country, they don't even like to mention the word suicide. They think if they mention it, it's a viable alternative. It's a stupid thing, you know. But it's how they thought. They thought that way, same way when I was a kid. Nothing's changed, you know, thought process. But they decided, they asked the questions of how many times have you ever felt depressed in high school, and have you ever felt depressed enough to consider suicide, and then how many times depressed, how many times suicide. And they put it out there. And I guessed we'd have about a 5% rate of teens saying, I've considered suicide. And everybody was shocked. It came in at about 45%.
Oh
So
my
think about that. Our area, which has some money has time on their hands because money. If they're like that, then I'm going to bet your community is the same way. And almost every community that has a little bit of affluence, or at least middle-class affluence, whatever that is, they have the luxury of feeling sad for themselves. Maybe in downtown Oakland, downtown Watts, they're in survival mode, so there's no time for depression. But a lot of the country's depressed, and began to do research and from the CDC and other organizations, and it turns out tens of thousands of teens every year are taking their life. Tens of thousands of teens are hurting themselves in some form, and that's what we want to touch every day. So our goal is to stop suicide by giving teens the resources that they need to get out of crisis.
So, Elliot, when you talk about the resources and you bust the myth about, okay, we're not talking about stress balls, we're talking about actual viable resources for teens. What are those?
So we started with a website. COVID made us put a lot of money into the website, made it extremely robust. And there are hundreds of resources, mostly for parents, because parents read, teens don't. The Teen Survival Toolkit, a Parent Survival Toolkit, all that's on the website, including how to get help. And I'll tell you about that in 1 second. It's all there. So it starts fundamentally with a website, because that's the world we live in, is you got to have a website, right? We're on every social media platform that you could think of with signs about depression and stress for teens and where they can get help. Knowing that teens don't read, even a Teen Survival Toolkit, they don't read. We created a program where 24/7 in all 50 states, they can text for help. And within 2 minutes now, we're down to 2 minutes, they will get a text back and they can speak to a trained therapist for up to 40 minutes, including Christmas, New Year's, birthdays, Thanksgiving, or just 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 in the morning when they can't sleep. They can get some help 40 minutes at a time, hang up, do it again. They can literally do it all day, which is amazing. So we have that for
That
teens,
is amazing.
and we get about 50 new teens every month on that crisis text line. And it's simple. Just type the word brighter, BRIGHTER. It's our charity, Brighter Day. Type the word brighter to 741-741, and they get somebody to talk to. And Cheryl, within 5 minutes, everybody asks the exact same question. Am I the only one feeling this way? They're totally isolated, totally withdrawn at that point.
You know, there's that old adage that people say that seems to not help when you're suffering. Well, you're not alone. And why I said it seems to not help is in my own darkest of times, if someone were to say, "Oh, you're not alone," it's like, no, I feel absolutely and utterly alone. It seems like it's the human condition. So when people ask this number one question, am I the only one who feels like this? And they're met with no, what happens for these teens?
Well, hopefully they're being engaged. And so they don't just get the word no. They get the
Right,
word,
right.
the answer is, we want you to know that tens of thousands of teenagers feel the exact same way at this exact same moment. So tell us what's going on in your life.
Wow.
We engage them.
Yes, these are really engaging, open-ended questions.
And I want to go back to the open-ended question because it's so important on that part. That doesn't work for every teen either. We know that if you can get your teen into counseling to talk about this, that's probably the best thing to do. But in most cities in the United States, when you call up a therapist, a teen and family therapist, it takes 6 to 10 weeks to get the appointment.
What?
Yep. So imagine your child, Cheryl, comes to you, your daughter says to you, "Mom, I'm cutting my leg. I'm thinking about hurting myself." And you call up and you finally get somebody that takes patients, and she says, I could see you October 12th. That is a lifetime away. You can't let that happen.
No.
So we teamed up with another company to create online live counseling. Online live counseling. So it's through Zoom, actually real Zoom. Through Zoom, an hour counseling session, right? These are $100 to $150 a count because it's a trained local therapist in your state. All 50 states again, right? And we don't want you as a parent, Cheryl, having to decide that either I'm going to get Mary help or I'm going to have to feed my other 2 kids, but I can't do both of those at the same time. So we're going to pay for the next 90 days of your therapy, your teen's therapy, or maybe you, Cheryl, as a mom, you need to get a little therapy yourself because you're trying to be a mom like your mom or grandmother did. And we live in 2024. You can't do that. So we get you some help, so we'll pay for yours too. And reason we picked 90 days is we found out it takes about 90 days to get your teen out of the crisis mode. And we want to pay for that. So that's pretty amazing all to itself.
That is absolutely amazing. Now, do you have donors? How are you coming up with these funds to help people in the ways that you do?
Well, we
And
raise
how
money.
can we all get involved?
We just did a big golf outing that raised, I think we netted about $40,000. We've got a concert coming up with for adults, Beach Boys cover band and an 80s band coming up in a few weeks from now. We just did a car show, an exotic car show up in Walnut Creek, California, that had 20 to 30,000 people there.
Oh,
Amazing,
wow.
amazing. So we are doing these things to raise money, but most of our money still comes from donations on the website at abrighterday.info. You could do it. I mean, you could do $11 a month, but in reality, the charities that do $11 a month, we live in California. That's below minimum wage. You know, you got to work an hour and a half to pay for your donation. That's silly. So we do accept donations, and we have some very generous donors that donate $5,000 to $50,000. And you know, every penny counts when you're a charity, because money is the mother's milk of charities. It just is what it is. So sometimes I feel, Cheryl, like I'm running for political office. I got to put my hand out every day and ask for money. You know, but that's the reality of running a charity.
But to be able to provide what you provide, I would imagine it's I would imagine the hesitation to put your money out, excuse me, put your hand out and ask for money. I would imagine that just falls away when you start to see the good that you're doing for people.
You can't be shy and run a charity. They can't be done in the same sentence. You've got to be willing to say, this charity is important. What we're doing is life-changing and life-saving. Come
Yes.
join our cause.
Absolutely extraordinary. So we will while you're on the topic of having people go to abrighterday.info, anywhere else that people should be looking for you? You'd mentioned you're on social. What else can people do to find about you and the work that you do?
So I'm on, obviously, LinkedIn, because you have to be on LinkedIn. The charity and myself are both on Facebook. We're on Instagram. You can find us there.
We'll put all of that information in the liner notes of the episode. But please, I want to hear more about the work that you do and what we can do to get involved. Please.
The biggest change, thank you so much. The biggest change, Cheryl, is parenting. It's not just teens. Teens everybody here is listening to this, they are pounded by social media. They live in 20 to 40-second bites in their head. Everything is short burst of information now. And I want you to know, Facebook, Twitter, all these things work. They understand that for your teen, that's short burst. You as a parent, you don't work in short burst. That's not how your brain works at all. Right? But one of the problems we have down there that's changed is not just the teen is depressed because of everybody's having a better time in their life but them. That's the social media message for them. But the message from the parents is that they're asking the same questions of their teen that was asked of them. And let me give you an example. When I was in high school, it turns out my mother was very ill when I was in high school. So my dad was really just taking care of me. So he's working full time. He's handling the nurse with my mother. And he said to me, he said, I don't really have a lot of time for you right now. So if I'm not going to put a lot of strings on you, if your grades don't go down any more than it, if you keep everything up, I'm good with what you're doing. And he'd come home and he'd say, how was school today? I'd say, good. He said, okay, and walk away. And so he didn't ask those in-depth questions. And one of the things you have to learn as a parent, Cheryl, is how to be a better parent by asking better questions. And if I could, I'll give you some examples.
Please.
Saying, how was your day? Because that's going to elicit a caveman response. Good, okay, shrug of the shoulders. Like you know nothing at the end of the conversation. I have a 30-year-old that still answers, who has a master's and 2 PhDs on the East Coast, and he still answers me monosyllabically, you know?
Right.
And so,
good. Yep.
we have on our website, we teach parents how to ask better questions. Instead of just how was school, what was your best class today? What did you learn today? What's your worst class today? Who's your best teacher and why? Who's the teacher you like the least and why? What class you wish you weren't taking and why? How's your best friend doing in class? How's your best friend doing with that class? Things like that. So we want to ask those questions. And then because social withdrawal is part of depression routines. We're going to talk to them about, why haven't you gotten together with Cheryl? I thought she's your best friend. We want to know that, because if Mary is your best friend, you're Mary's best friend, and our daughter Mary is pulling away from you, I want to know that. And if they decide they don't want to go to the dances anymore or the socials, I want to know that. And if they don't care about the sport they were in or the after-school program they were in, I want to know that. But you don't know that without asking. So the way we recommend you do that, Cheryl, is, first of all, when you have dinner, no cell phones. None. Take the cell phones, put them in a basket, do something. Don't call your older sibling. Don't call grandma. Nothing happens during dinner but questions and conversation. And if that works well, and you learn how to ask questions in an extremely non-judgmental way, the next thing you do is, when you get in the car together, because we live in a world of taking kids to and from things, is no cell phones, no radio, no listening with iPods in, nothing.
Right.
Talk to each other. And then if that doesn't work, or you want more, our brains are trained to walk and talk at the same time. Take a weekly walk with your team. No cell phone, and ask good questions. And remember to be non-judgmental, because if you're struggling in chemistry, and I always pick on chemistry because my daughter struggled in it. If you're struggling in chemistry and you say, well, you know what's really messing up my life? I hate chemistry. I hate the teacher. I feel stupid in that class. I've never felt so bad in my life and so worthless as I do in chemistry. If they shared that with you and you say, no problem, I'll have a tutor here next Tuesday. If that's your response as a mom, because that's a normal response, you jump the gun. It's too fast. You still might need to get a tutor. You got to hear your daughter out first on what's really going on, because maybe she's sitting next to the one person that she hates who has been bullying her. You got to find those things out. And then you can get a tutor if you need be. Or maybe you need to change the class and talk to the principal. Because those are real facts on the ground, is that there's one mean girl or one mean guy in there, and your child sits next to him, so therefore they've checked out of that class mentally. Or maybe they're not even going in, and they're just standing outside doing nothing. So they're guaranteed to fail it.
Boy, through asking these questions and becoming a better listener, we can not only hear what's being said, like you'd said, without jumping the gun to the solution, but hearing what's, then giving them a chance, listening so well that we get a chance to hear what's behind what's said at the surface level. And that would never happen through those rote questions that we're used to asking from the past. This is really fantastic. I could see the difference that would make in relationships in all contexts, Elliot.
Remember,
But it's
teens don't
essential with
communicate.
kids.
I'm sorry. Teens don't communicate. They stink at communication. I was watching a show last night, Chicago Fire, and it was one of those repeat episodes. And the I can't remember the names of the characters, but she said to Kelly, who's one of the main guys in there, the studly looking guy that everybody loves, and she said, I understand that communications are not part of your rule book, but maybe you could tell me how you're really feeling. But it's kind of true. We stink at communications, not because you weren't raised that way. Your mom probably did a very good job, and your dad. Most people want to be really good parents. It just, we don't have the adequate tools anymore because social media has changed the rules so quickly, and we're two working parents for the most part now. Who's got time? Think about your night. You get home, so Cheryl, magnify your message. You're getting home at night. You're assuming you're not single here, which means if you're single and taking care of your kids, your night never ends. Assuming you even have some help doing this from your spouse, or your spouse has help from their spouse. You got to get the kids fed. You got to get them their homework. You got to get them in the shower. You got all these things to do. Your night doesn't begin for you till almost 9 o'clock. The last thing you want to do is spend more time engaging your kid, because that means you have less time for you. That's what's got to change.
Right. Boy, this cell phone free zone that you speak about at meals, on the walks and during car time, it's so alien. And it's so easy to imagine how one could just discount that. It's a funny phenomenon now with technology being so omnipresent. We I can just speak for myself. I get into the car and immediately, who am I gonna dial? With there's no comfort in being with the silence. I wake up in the morning, "Hey, what kind of recording can I put on?" There's no moments of silence for conversation of the nature of conversation that you're speaking about to naturally arise in that space. If the space around us is always filled with something.
Good point. We live in a world of clutter.
Right. It's time, it sounds from what you're saying, it's time for us to tell the truth to ourselves about that which is cluttering our space before we ask our kids to declutter their own.
Imagine you've got these two teenagers at home. You want them to go to college. You want them to get good grades. You want them to be socially happy. You want good outcomes for your teens. Most everybody is like that. There's always the outlier that doesn't, but most people want that. But the hard part is you can't define their happiness. You only see it through your prism, and your prism is based on your experience, which is different than today's experience. I mean, when I was a kid, we went out and played after school or on weekends. You left at dawn, you came home at dusk for dinner. It's basically what you did. You would never let your kids do that today. So
No.
they don't get any social interaction except in an organized ball field. That's the difference. So they don't get conflict resolution. They don't get communication skills. My son, Jake, when at his funeral, I had a number of people came up to me and said, "We think Jake had one personality with you in the family and another personality with his parents. I mean, with his friends. He was funnier than heck with his friends and had a big heart and helped anybody out he could. But at home, you wouldn't have known it." And I would have known it, looking back on it, if I had just bothered to dig more into his life. And so my mother, when I was growing up, when I was young, and she realized who was in the class, and I used to publish all the phone numbers of the parents in the class, she would call the mother up, because it was a mother-to-mother time in those days. And she'd say, "Hi, I'm Elliot's mother. You mind if I stop by for a cup of coffee, or would you like to have a cup of coffee at my place this way? And here's my phone number in case you ever need me." And I was so embarrassed and humiliated that my mother did that. But wasn't she right in retrospect?
Right. Wasn't she on to something?
Yeah.
No matter how sick she was, didn't she have something figured out?
It's another apology I know to my mom. It's another apology I owe to my mother if she ever comes back in my life from the dead.
Mm. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with today, whether it's signs or being able to spot something or something else we should be providing for the teens and young people in our lives?
That's a great question, Cheryl. And I write about this all the time. And people can subscribe to the newsletter, which goes out every month with 4 or 5 great articles. I like writing about them. Inaction is not an acceptable resolution for teen depression. Let's start with that. Just thinking it's going to go away is not a good thing. It doesn't go away. So you as a parent, through your questions, through your conversations, through your positive inquiries, you're going to find out that your teen might be doing one of a few things. They might be withdrawing socially. They might be getting angrier than they used to. They might be changing their eating patterns. They might be changing their sleeping patterns. That was my son. He couldn't fall asleep till 3 a.m. Right? That might things change. You know about eating patterns that they change all based on personal moods, because people have mood changes. They stop eating or they eat too much. And I don't mean just cutting yourself, but or purging, binge and purging. I mean, they simply, I can't live without another bag of Lay's potato chips, or everything tastes terrible. I can't even eat it anymore. The two extremes on those two. If you notice pattern changes in your child, and by the way, every teenager has pattern changes all the time. That doesn't mean they're depressed. They're just going to be a normal teenager. It's when they start having 2 or 3 or 4 symptoms of depression that you as a parent need to put together and ask better questions. And don't jump to conclusion, be non-judgmental, but know that maybe we can work through this, but I need to be aware of the tools available to me to get my child some help without embarrassing them, and knowing that if I point my finger at them and tell them what I'm doing as if I'm the dictator in 2024, it probably will not work.
The dictator. Wow, that is a role change from the old parenting because I said so model. So you said, okay, don't jump to conclusions and it- be non-judgmental. Boy, that's a feat, I could imagine.
It is,
If
it's
you're
hard.
hearing things that are frightening, you've got to stay in the present and just keep asking better questions without judging. Okay.
So
Boy,
imagine it's the old days. Your son goes to you and your husband and says, Jimmy at school is bullying me. You either go to the principal, or if you even want to go back before that, your husband gets in his car, goes down to Jimmy's father, and threatens to beat up Jimmy and his father. Right? Because that's what used to happen.
right.
That doesn't solve anything, does it? We know we're
No.
smarter now, aren't we? That maybe going to the principal will help, and you should make the school aware of it, that Jimmy's being bullied, but you're going to have to work with Jimmy on this. Because just telling Jimmy, I'm getting you a pair of boxing gloves, I'm going to teach you how to fight back, doesn't necessarily solve that problem. Or put him in Taekwondo doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Those could all be good solutions, all right, but that doesn't fix the problem. Fixing the problem is he's got to learn how to be stronger to stand up to the bullying, and 2 is how to get the bully to stop bullying, which you're not in control of either, because that's not your life. So you got to get other people, help from other people, but you've got to be open-minded enough to say, if we can't fix it here, we're gonna have to fix it at a different school, because I'm not going to let this continue.
Right. And raise your child to be resilient enough if something similar were to occur to to speak with you about it then, or it's just you're opening up not just what to do, but a whole new realm of communication, parenting, relationships, and being there for
Yeah.
the kids in our lives.
You've got to imagine, we live in this world that's so different than your parents lived in, and I know you've got a great story to tell yourself about your history. Everybody has a really good story to tell. Not all of it's tragic. Not all of it is personally injuring. We happen to have them, but if you can help your children on a path where they can grow in the most positive of manners and deal with adversity, which they will have in the most positive of ways, imagine what an adult they're going to be and what a better parent they're going to be too.
Boy, that you are giving these tools away, these resources away, one family at a time
It
to
is.
thousands of families month over month over month is such an
It's good.
inspiration.
My mother used to say to me, she said, teach your children how you would like them to teach their children.
Brilliant.
So
Elliot, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with
oh,
today?
that's pretty good. Just help. We'd love your involvement. First, Cheryl, I want to thank you so much for having me on. I think what you do all around, and I is kudos. I'm a raving fan of everything that you do at Magnify Your Message. I think that's just fabulous. I got a lot out of it. I think if people really want to help the next generation out, come to our website, get on the newsletter. If you can donate money, great. But if not, use our resources. They're not based on a donation. They're there for you for free. They're literally hundreds, if not thousands of pages. Even inpatient counseling referrals come off our website. They do that. So we want to help you get help. We can't fix anything for you. All we can do to you as a parent is give you resources to help you solve the problem or get your teen to help it. But you're in Oklahoma, You're in New Jersey, we're in California. We can't fix that. I can't meet with your team and you and fix that, but we could talk about how to fix it so you get it done.
Elliot, you are making a profound difference and leaving such a legacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into this conversation. Elliot Kallen is proof that even in the face of unimaginable loss, we, each of us, has the power to turn our pain into purpose, to create impact, and to lift others up when they need it most. Until next time, keep magnifying your message, your impact, and your purpose. I'll see you back here soon. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with everyone that you feel it would benefit. Thank you in advance. And when you're ready to share your story and your work with the world, I can help. Visit CherylHunter.com to learn how. I am Cheryl Hunter, and until next time, know that your message has the power to change the world.